Is the movement to neutralize the military a mere coincidence or a carefully orchestrated conspiracy? The suspicion that the regime-subversion manuals of North Korea, China, and Venezuela are being replicated right here in the Republic of Korea has now turned into a certainty. Sabotage that weakens a nation's military power never happens by accident. It is a sophisticated scenario that is only completed when the distorted ideological convictions of a ruler align with the success formula of dictatorial states. The remarks made by a close associate of a core ruling party official who shouted that the National Assembly must seize control of the judiciary, claiming that Venezuela is a good model for judicial reform, clearly reveal the ultimate destination this regime is heading toward. This is why we are reminded of the brutal history where Hugo Chávez crushed the judiciary and the media and finally completed his dictatorship by turning the military into his private guard. From the perspective of international political psychology, it is because they view the nation's legitimate military as a potential enemy that threatens their power. The Security Neutralization Roadmap, which was activated as soon as the regime took office, had already been fully mapped out in their minds even before they came to power. Then, what are the psychological processes and background behind appointing an individual with zero military experience as Minister of National Defense? This unprecedented appointment of a person with absolutely no command experience to head the Ministry of National Defense conceals a highly sophisticated and cruel operation of psychological castration. First, it aims to induce psychological pressure and humiliation among four-star generals. The four-star generals of our military, who prepare for war and command hundreds of thousands of troops, are military experts who have dedicated their entire lives to the field. Placing someone with zero military knowledge or command experience as their direct superior is an act that utterly tramples upon the military's pride and honor. In criminal psychology, this is a tactic known as status degradation. If a leader appoints a general, a military expert, as minister, that general would naturally feel a sense of psychological resistance and refuse to comply, based on military conscience and expertise when given orders that compromise military discipline or weaken national security. From the leader's perspective, such a figure becomes highly burdensome to control. However, seating an individual with no command experience as minister changes the dynamic entirely, because this minister knows absolutely nothing about the inner workings of the military. They will offer absolute obedience only to the leader who appointed them. The leader then uses this minister to hand down unreasonable and irrational directives to the four-star generals. When forced to take orders from a minister who lacks even basic military common sense, the generals experience immense psychological humiliation, ultimately breaking their own military spirit. It deliberately fosters a sense of defeatism within the military leadership, making them think, what can I possibly achieve under a person like this? Second, whose directives led to this appointment? This brings us to the psychological background of the power cartel. Under whose instructions or advice did the leader appoint such a figure? This stems from a shadow security cartel within the regime and the personnel control manuals of foreign socialist forces. In international political psychology, dictators or leaders with totalitarian tendencies harbor an extreme fear of a strong military. They know that if the military is strong, it may rise up under the banner of defending the Constitution against their illegal usurpation of power or destruction of the constitutional order. Consequently, the core power brokers behind the scenes within the regime, along with foreign forces such as China linked to them, instill the following psychological conditioning into the leader. If you acknowledge the military's expertise, they will become uncontrollable. To control the military, you must not appoint someone who knows the military best, but rather a complete outsider who can dismantle the military's authority. The leader actively embraced this advice, selecting a figure who would be thoroughly submissive and act as a perfect puppet This personnel move was not intended to maximize the military's combat capability, rather. It is a criminological strategy of placing a proxy solely for the purpose of, quote, regime security and military control. There was a media report that a bizarre directive was issued and subsequently withdrawn, ordering guard post personnel at frontline division borders to carry expandable batons instead of firearms. Did this truly stem from the mere over-loyalty of a frontline commander or a close aide? Absolutely not. This can be anticipated as a balloon effect and a test that manifested during the process of systematic instructions and policies being handed down from above. It is highly likely that the regime's leadership and the Ministry of National Defense line constantly issued guidelines emphasizing military disarmament and a peace framework. When immense pressure to not provoke the enemy and to ease tensions on the front line is continuously injected into the military, staff officers and commanders who are desperate to read the room resort to extreme overinterpretation. From a criminal psychology standpoint, it can be argued that subordinates issue such absurd directives to align themselves with the dominant sentiment of the higher-ups. Such a directive could never be issued if the leadership truly valued national security. Therefore, this was no simple mishap, but rather a probe thrown out by the regime's leadership or the forces behind them to check just how far will our military tolerate disarmament, although it was temporarily withdrawn due to fierce backlash inside and outside the military. The very fact that they attempted to strip firearms from the hands of frontline soldiers proves that an invisible, massive directive to undermine the essence of the military is already at work. According to media reports, the Ministry of National Defense is seriously considering a plan to consolidate the Army, Naval, and Air Force academies into a single entity, establishing a National Armed Forces Academy and relocate the Korea Military Academy, KMA, to a region with strong left-wing tendencies, sparking a fierce debate within and outside the military. This absurd blueprint to integrate the three service academies and relocate the KMA, which country does it emulate, and how will it affect military discipline? This bizarre project is a direct imitation of the military restructuring operation, a blueprint for dismantling the military, previously used by the Chavez regime in Venezuela and other leftist dictatorships in Latin America, such as Bolivia. First, it is an imitative crime, modeled after foreign dictatorships, designed to dismantle military tradition and elitism. After seizing power, Venezuela's Chavez integrated and abolished existing traditional military schools, unifying them into the, quote, Bolivarian Military University. He eliminated the traditional curriculum that bred military experts and filled the void with socialist, ideological education, and regime defense indoctrination. The current leader's attempt to consolidate the three service academies follows this model precisely. The Army, Navy, and Air Force each possess distinct operational environments, unique traditions, and academic expertise. Merging them is not for military synergy. It is an intention to dilute and dismantle the unique, quote-unquote, elite consciousness and patriotic tradition held by each service academy. Furthermore, the plan to relocate the KMA from the capital to a region with a strong leftist ideological bias is an act that destroys the symbolic center of the military. The KMA site in the nation's capital is a historical symbol of national defense. Pushing it out to a region with a contrasting ideological sentiment and building apartments in its place is a highly sophisticated psychological warfare tactic designed to degrade the military into a mere tool for real estate development, thereby inflicting a fatal wound on the honor of our military personnel. Second, it aims to break military discipline and morale, leading to the collapse of professionalism and the loss of future assets. When such plans are set in motion, military discipline and morale plunge to an irrecoverable depth. First, it will deplete future elite officer resources. When the prestige and tradition of the academies crumble, talented young people will no longer apply. This leads to a qualitative degradation of the officer corps that is meant to carry the future of our military. Second, it aims to foster distrust and division within the military. It forces the Army, Navy, and Air Force into turf wars during the integration process, causing chaos in the chain of command and severely degrading joint operational capabilities. Third, it aims to erase the military spirit, seeing their school abolished and relocated at a single word from the regime. Despite dedicating their lives to the nation, service members fall into an extreme state of helplessness, thinking we are not the shield of the nation, but merely disposable items for the regime. What is the leader so afraid of that drives them to weaken the military? Let us analyze this through criminal and political psychology. The inner essence of why the leader desires to weaken the military so desperately lies in Couphobia, fear of a coup and a, quote, lack of legitimacy. In political psychology, a leader who has lost public legitimacy due to allegations surrounding election transparency and the suppression of freedom of expression is perpetually plagued by anxiety. When citizens pour into the streets, the leader falls into a paranoid fear that the military might side with the people or turn its weapons against the regime to defend the Constitution. From a criminal psychology perspective, because the leader's past criminal record and missteps are so massive, they harbor an extreme dread that leaving a military equipped with physical power intact means they could come to arrest them at any moment. Therefore, to alleviate that fear, they preemptively defang and declaw the military. It is a textbook defense mechanism of a terrified dictator who can only sleep soundly after degrading the military to a police level force or an administrative support group tasked solely with protecting the security of the regime. Dear subscribers, today we have witnessed the ugly psychological reality of a leader who seeks to protect their own prison of power by neutralizing the military, installing a minister with no military experience to trample on the honor of generals, attempting to strip firearms from the front lines, and trying to dismantle the service, academies. All of these actions are ultimately desperate struggles to escape the terror of the karma they have created. However, the ancient wisdom of the East tells us those who sought to intimidate their citizens and maintain power by weakening their own military, without exception, met a miserable end. This is because a regime that breaks the morale of its own military strips itself of the power to withstand foreign invasion or internal explosion. If you found today's lecture insightful, please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Please share your sharp insights on how to protect the security of the Republic of Korea in the comments below. Thank you for watching.